As the school expands, our need for new quality literature expands. So I would like to ask you for suggestions of books that we can add to our literature curriculum. Now, in doing that, I would like to define what are our criteria for literature that we would include as worthy of the VanDamme Academy curriculum. So a couple of those criteria. First, it has to be a book with clearly drawn, well-developed characters. One of the values of great literature to the children is that the characters are defined, they're essentialized, they have certain pronounced and memorable traits, and those characters come to stand for those traits in our minds and really capture them in a dramatic and essentialized form. So for example, when our kids think of Miss Trunchbull from Matilda, Roald Dahl's Matilda, or Miss Honey, her foil, or Matilda herself, certain qualities and characteristics will scream in their minds because they're so clearly and memorably defined. The great literature also has to have beautiful, elevated language, in my opinion. Often the books will have language that's almost inaccessible to the children. I think that's okay. If they can acquire the basic message of the book and at the same time be exposed to newer, rich vocabulary, to eloquent phrases, turns of phrase, I think that's really good for developing their eloquence and their sort of instinctive feel for what it means to use great, beautiful language. My favorite author for that quality is William Steig, author of Abel's Island and many, many other beautiful children's books. And his use of language is just exquisite. I actually just ordered about 15 of his books in the mail, and I'm like a child waiting for Christmas morning. I got one today, Gorky Rises, and I just opened to a random page and read this line. It was early summer. Everything was fresh and fair. The grass was green, green. The sky was blue, immensely blue. The world was flooded with gracious light. Beautiful, beautiful use of language. And I want those sorts of phrases in my children's heads. And speaking of worlds beautiful with gracious light, I also think that it's important that the children's books be benevolent in tone, that they project a world in which values are achievable. That doesn't mean a world without pain. It doesn't mean a world without conflict. But it means a world in which conflict can be resolved, in which pain goes away, not in which it's the defining quality of the world. So, for example, if I go into a children's bookstore and just pick random books off the shelf these days, they seem to be just dominated by playground nastiness and brutality and backstabbing and unpleasantness. And that is not the universe I want to project to my children. I want them to have the feeling that those things are aberrations. Those are exceptions. They're not what they should expect from the world. What they should expect is benevolence and values and happiness, and that these conflicts along the way are things that we overcome in the achievement of a great life. So, benevolent, beautiful universe is another thing that I'm looking for. I think that the conflicts presented within the book should be appropriate to children. The greatest exception to this, in my mind, is Disney movies, actually. It always struck me as odd that Disney movies tend to have these epic, huge, dramatic conflicts, characters that are evil on a huge scale, and that is very, very far removed from the life of a toddler or a young child. So when my kids were little, always liked things like Blue's Clues, which presented conflicts like, we need to find out who left tracks in the garden, and looking around for clues to solve this little mystery. Now that is a curiosity or a conflict that's appropriate to a toddler. So anyway, in looking for books, I'm looking for books that ideally present conflicts that are relevant to, accessible by, and appropriate to the age of the children for whom the literature is intended. And finally, ideally, it will have good, rich thematic material to discuss. There will be a view of the world, some insight, some some value that's offered to the child that everything in the book adds up to. And if they do the work to put the pieces together and really think about what the author is trying to intend, what the author intends, they'll come away with some valuable insight on the world. So the first author that comes to mind for me in that respect is Frances Hodgson Burnett and The Little Princess or The Secret Garden, but there are many, many more. So if you know of any books with clearly drawn characters, with beautiful language, with a benevolent world, with conflicts that are appropriate to children, with thematic material worthy of discussion in the classroom, please pass them my way.